Hey, what is going on, y'all? It is your boy Xeno Martinez here, back again with another video, and I am finally, based on your votes, releasing some guide videos, especially for beginners. And today we're covering the mind transfer clone Jutsu that you get from the Xeno DLC. So you know what? Let's get into it. Over a year ago, Xeno's mind transfer clone Jutsu received a buff that made it one of the most powerful secret techniques in the game. As a result, it has been banned in the competitive scene and now can only be run in casual matches or non-Shinobi Pro League based scrims. In its description, Mind Transfer Clone Jutsu unleashes the Mind Transmission Jutsu on multiple targets, paralyzing them for a certain period of time. Additionally, inputting a secret technique causes explosive damage and reduces secret technique gauge. What's not explained is that the Mind Transfer Clone Jutsu is now one of the fastest charging ultimates for the healer class, and when struck by it, opponents can lose anywhere between 20 to 75% of their secret technique gauge. But that is dependent on the size of the ult gauge needed for your secret technique. For example, if you're using a technique that has a smaller ult gauge bar, like Gentle Step Twin Line Fist, then you'll see a higher percentage taken versus one with a larger one, because Mind Transfer Clone Jutsu takes a set amount of secret technique regardless of what is being used. Unlike Feather Illusion though, this technique can only be activated while on the ground. So not only does it require great observational skills, but the user of this technique must be mindful of their positioning on the battlefield and anticipate when the most appropriate time would be to use it. This is important to keep in mind because its activation is slower than that of Feather Illusion, meaning that if not timed correctly, you could provide your enemies with an opportunity to counter it with moves like Flame Formation, Koto, or even Kamui Bond or Climax. One of the other challenges to using this technique is that it leaves you vulnerable during its activation, duration, and deactivation, because Mind Transfer remains active until all enemies caught in the technique are taken out of it. In addition, the deactivation animation for this technique is about 2 to 3 seconds long, meaning that if your enemies are positioned close enough to you, they can target you and deal damage while you're still coming out of the technique. Now, there are 3 ways that your opponents can be taken out of the secret technique. The first being that you activate the technique and hit your opponents with their explosive tags. The second being that one of your allies strikes your opponents while caught and wakes them up. And the third being that you're killed while using the technique. Regardless of whether you survive the usage of this technique or not, those caught will still lose their secret technique gauge, which is something that is not clearly explained in the description for this ninjutsu. Outside of the reduction of the secret technique gauge, there are other advantages to using the Mind Transfer Clone Jutsu. One of the most notable is that its range is significantly larger than that of Feather Illusion, which I believe is meant to compensate for the fact that it must be activated while on the ground. Something else to consider when running this technique is that all enemies within the range of its second activation will take explosion damage, whether they're trapped in the technique or not. And all explosive tags stack explosion damage, so it is easier to get a 2 to 4 piece when enemies are low or in close proximity to one another. This is especially effective if your opponents do not have a substitution available, because unfortunately, the second activation is subbable. But combining this technique with ninjutsus like Flower Cannon or ultimates like Insect Jamming can increase your chances of getting a team wipe. And let me tell you, ain't nothing feel more OP than you wiping out the whole team with this jutsu. In addition to that, one of the major advantages to running the Mind Transfer Clone Jutsu is that it can be held for about 7 seconds before the enemy is released, meaning that you can extend the duration of this technique to nearly 10 seconds by activating it when you've held the enemy for about 5 to 6 seconds. When thinking about game modes like Flag Battle, a well-played Mind Transfer ult could provide your team with the opportunity needed to not only capture the flag, but also run it to your home base without issue. And when thinking about base battle, holding the enemies in place could help you cap the base or single out an enemy to be taken out before others could react or counterattack on modes like combat battle or barrier. Before heading into my final thoughts, I also want to highlight that the Mind Transfer ult is useful when trying to take enemies out of ninjutsus like Nidojizo, orbs, petrification, and even secret techniques like Feather Illusion. The Mind Transfer Clone Jutsu is one of the most powerful and versatile ninjutsus in the game. With the reduction in secret technique and its ult charge advantage, it is no wonder that it's banned in the competitive scene regardless of its challenges. If well played, you can overcome its disadvantages and turn the tide in battle, but you need to play it strategically and work with your allies to do so. Keeping that in mind, if you see that your healer has launched this technique, please do not hit your enemies out of it, because it places them at a major disadvantage and could be the deciding factor that influences whether victory is attainable for your team or not. And whether you play this game with friends or solo, Naruto to Boruto Shinobi Striker is a team-based game, and if you do not have this DLC, it is my recommendation that you make the investment. Just for the love of God, do not run Water Pillar with Xeno heals and Mind Transfer ult, because if you do and I run into you, you're gonna understand why it's hard out here, but your boy wouldn't know. Period.